Thriller? Question mark. Dolphins, Bills. Close the door? Question mark. Let's answer these questions and more on today's edition of Dolphins Post Game. Bills, Dolphins. Next, let's get rolling. Fins up. This is Dolphins football on the ice and behind the benches and sports for beginners. Dolphins football begins now. Bills, Dolphins. Next on Dolphins Post Game. Welcome to Sports for Beginners. This is the show where I cover the Pittsburgh Penguins, Toronto Blue Jays, and take you on a journey through the world of sports. From the fans' perspective, here is your host, Scott McGregor. Let's have some fun. Well, hello everyone, and welcome into Dolphins Post Game. Bills, Dolphins. It's the second of Dolphins Post Game and the wraparound of Dolphins Post Game for the Bills and the Dolphins. Dolphins Nation, I think we saw this coming. Bills Nation, I think we saw this coming as well. I am your host of the program, Thomas McGregor. This is Dolphins Post Game, and well, look what we have here. Was this a big surprise to any of us? I'm not sure it was. Let's get you the names of the quarterbacks into our opening portion of this program. But before we do, a quick recap of what's going to happen on this show for Dolphins Post Game. And we're going to start things off with telling you what's coming up on the later half of Dolphins post game when we finish up the program. Of course, we'll be taking you and getting you ready for Monday Night Football, the next action for the Miami Dolphins in week number 10, seeing that they had a bye week on week 6 of the season. So that will be coming in the later portions of the program. We'll also get you ready for Bills' next matchup. The Bills' next matchup will be against the Indianapolis Colts of Indianapolis, who in their match against the Dolphins ended up beating the Dolphins by a score of, I believe that score was 16-10. Yes, 16-10. Colts over the Dolphins. Before we get to that and the end of the program, though, coming up in just a matter of moments before we get ready to set you up for Indianapolis Colts, Buffalo Bills, and of course, Miami Dolphins and the Los Angeles Rams being the next topic of conversation for the Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. We'll get you all caught up to speed on the Week 9 recap detailing the primetime games, and if time prevents it, we will get you a look at what the half of the Sunday shows looked like in Sunday afternoon's Week 9 matchups, including one of the ones that I think was quite an interesting one to talk about, but I'll get into that interesting game in the Week 9 recap. Before all of that takes place, we'll do our traditional game stats, which is coming up in just a matter of minutes from now after we do our game breakdown. That's also coming up. But we also have an addition that I like to call the Dolphins Player of the Season this far. That's going to be coming up ahead of the Week 9 recap for the NFL season, as we are just 9 more weeks away from the NFL playoffs, which take off into high gear after the 18th week has gone in the book. So in just a few minutes' time, we're going to take a look at the game breakdown, and I got some thoughts on this game as well. But now that you know what to expect of this Dolphins post-game show, let's kick it into high gear with a look at our quarterbacks for your Buffalo Bills and your Miami Dolphins. As usual, we start with the head coaches, and of course, the head coaches of this game, Mike McDaniel for the Dolphins and Sean McDermott for the Buffalo Bills. What about the quarterbacks for this matchup? Well, the first quarterback to talk about is the Buffalo Bills quarterback, and that was Josh Allen, and he would be faced with the same guy he faced when the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins met in week number 2. That's right. Tua Tagovailoa came back, and he is back in the saddle after losing to the Bills in week 2 and being out a couple of weeks for making his grand return against Kyler Murray and the Arizona Cardinals after the bye week on week 6 gave them some extra time to heal Tua Tagovailoa and get us ready for the Bills and the Dolphins. We'll talk about Tua's injury, and we'll talk about the game all coming up when Bills post game, or rather Dolphins post game on this program continues. We'll take a timeout. And when we come back from that timeout, we'll break down the game, get to the game stats, talk about the kicking matchup. I got some thoughts to talk about. We'll talk about Tua's injury leading to returning against the Arizona Cardinals. And then I've got the Bills and Dolphins game stats also coming up on this program. But the game breakdown and some thoughts on the game from me, the host of Dolphins Post Game, coming up when Sports for Beginners and On the Ice and Behind the Benches return to Dolphins football after this timeout. Stay with us.
Looking for conversations on books and more, as well as tutorials on using your favorite devices and applications? You've come to the right place. Join us weekly on Spicy Techie, where Ali and Sienna provide insightful conversations, as well as useful tips and tricks to help you along on your technological journey. To learn more, tune into the show and like the Spicy Techie Facebook page. Search for Spicy Techie.
Hey, hockey fans, your host of On the Ice and Behind the Benches here, Thomas McGregor, with some exciting news. The PWHL hockey action is about to get back underway, and that means it's time for the return of PWHL Recap. During this season of PWHL Recap, we'll still be covering select games of the season like we did last year, but we won't be covering the entire PWHL season leading up to their final matchups in May. However, we will be, if there are any, covering a takeover for the PWHL this season. It's time to drop the puck and get ready for another edition of PWHL Recap starting in December. Me back in the saddle because, as the message states, hockey is for everyone. All their love, forever, always. See you when PWHL Recap returns to On the Ice and Behind the Benches December. I'll catch you then, hockey fans.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
The last time the Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills met was back on Thursday Night Football in week number 2 of the NFL season. Despite a good effort and an injured Tua on the play of that week, as he would be out the next couple of weeks until the bye week and then make his tremendous return against the Arizona Cardinals with the Kyler Murray matchup. Miami Dolphins would lose that game in week number 2 of the season with a final score of Buffalo Bills 31, Miami Dolphins 10. So, what was the outcome in a game that also determined a factor of the question? Close the door? Question mark. Welcome you back into Dolphins post game. Now there's a lot to get into about Tua's injury, but we have a lot of other things to cover as well. So we're gonna talk about Tua throughout the program. But before we get to any of that, let's talk about how the Bills and the Dolphins played their second and final matchup between each other this season on week nine's matchup between the Bills, 2-6 Dolphins, and 7-2 Bills, or rather 6-2 Bills, 7-2 Bills right now as they approach the matchup between the Indianapolis Colts at 7-2. They were 6-2 on the season, going into the matchup with a matchup victory of 31-10 against the Seahawks. Meanwhile, the Dolphins entered the Bills Stadium of Highmark with a 5-2 record, and now it is a 6-2 record, heading into a matchup against the Los Angeles Rams with their matchup happening a Monday Night Football. How does game 2 between the Bills and the Dolphins and week nine's matchup of Bills and Dolphins AFC Showdown begin? Let's talk about it. It begins with both teams trading field goals with Jason Sanders and Tyler Bass each kicking a 40-yard field goal and 39-yard field goal for both teams to be knotted up at 3 points apiece. 3 for the Bills, 3 for the Dolphins. At the end of one quarter in the first half of two halves, we've got a 3-3 tie with both teams kicking field goals for 39 and 40 yards. On a chain gets things started for the Miami Dolphins, and they end up going up 10-3 with Jason Sanders kicking a field goal up and good. It's up and good. The Miami Dolphins now have 10, but the Buffalo Bills still have 3. How do we get out of this funk, Buffalo Bills fans? Well, you do this. You kick a 49-yard field goal like you did earlier when it was 40 yards, and you kick it up and make sure it goes through the uprights to make the lead a little bit more closer than the Miami Dolphins fans want it to be. It will be a 10-6 halftime game with the Bills trailing 4 points at the half, with Tyler Bass being the cornerback of the game and the kicker to keep this game close. 6 Bills, 10 Dolphins. Now, of course, Devon Chain had some help with the pass being thrown by Tua. Tua would pass short left to Devon Chain for about 14-yard touchdown, which will ultimately result with Jason Sanders kicking it up and good, an extra point, which would leave us with a 10-3 Dolphins lead over the Buffalo Bills. But then we would go into half with the Bills only trailing by 4 points, 6-10, in favor of the Miami Dolphins. And that would be the first half, with the Miami Dolphins picking up 7 in the second quarter, the Bills picking up 3, making their score 6-10 in the halftime mark. So, ask the question, what happened the remainder of the game? Well, this is what happened. Josh Allen passes short left to Hollins for a 1 yard touchdown. M. Holland is a 1 yard touchdown, and the game gets pretty close. It's the Dolphins 10, the Bills 12. It's a safety game with Tyler Bass, his kick going up. Oh, but he missed the net. Oh, he missed the uprights. Tyler Bass misses a kick, and the game remains at a safety, with the points being 12 Buffalo Bills, 10 Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins now on the ball with 3:02 left to go in the third quarter of the second half. Their drive stalls out, but Jason Sanders is able to kick a 23-yard field goal up and good through the uprights, and the Dolphins regain the lead, but only by one. It is now Dolphins 13, Bills 12. The very last drive of the Buffalo Bills in the third quarter would end up taking just two plays, with Ray Davis getting a 63-yard touchdown, and 2-point conversion attempt does work, with Keon Coleman getting a completed pass from Josh Allen, and the Dolphins now find themselves in a bit of a hole, with the Buffalo Bills taking the lead 20-13. Seems like it's all over, Dolphins fans, right? Seems like it's all over. The Buffalo Bills are going to win this 20-13 in favor of the Buffalo Bills, right? Seems like it's all over, right? Well, we still have one quarter left to play, and this is where things get very, very, very interesting. Devon Achane, remember him? We talked about him earlier in the beginning of the game, where he scored a touchdown thanks to a pass from Tua, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins. Tua gave him a passing touchdown, and the very next quarter, in the second half, the fourth quarter of play, he does this. He goes right in for 8-yard touchdown, and Jason Sanders, the kick is up, it's good, and what do you know? We are tied at Bills 20, Dolphins 20. It's tied at 20 apiece. Now Allen, knowing we're in a tie ball game, tries to get a pass short right to Q Morris. He does get Q Morris for a 2-yard touchdown. They get a 1-yard caught yard into the end zone. Tyler Bass kicks the ball up. It's good. And the Bills have a 27-20 lead over the Dolphins. Final minutes of the second half approaching. Tua passes short to Jalen Waddle. Waddle. The Penguin is in the town of Buffalo Bills, and he's got a touchdown for 7 yards. We are knotted up again and tied again at Bills 27, Dolphins 27. The kick by Jason Sanders is up and good, and it is a tie ball game, 27-27. Game clock is ticking down to the final 10 seconds of the ball game between the Bills and the Dolphins, tied at 27 apiece, with a chance for overtime between the Bills and the Dolphins. But Tyler Bass, he started it, he will finish it with a 61-yard field goal after missing one to make it a 13-10 lead over the Miami Dolphins, which ended up being a 10-12 lead over the Miami Dolphins, meaning the Dolphins only trailed by 2 points. He doesn't miss this one, 61-yard field goal. Ferguson, the center, the holder was Martin, and that would be the score, 30-27. So hey, it kind of looks the same odd number than the Dolphins had in week number 2 with the Buffalo Bills. Only that final score was 31-10. We'll see where things take us with the remainder of the Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills schedule, as the Buffalo Bills have just 2 games away from closing the AFC East door and not only clinching a playoff spot, but clinching a division. All right, we are getting into our next timeout of the game, and our game stats are on the way for Dolphins Post Game, as well as our Dolphins Player of the Season so far. That'll be followed by our game Balls of the Game, but coming up next when we return, we'll have the game stats for you, and then we'll get a look at Week 9's action between our primetime games of Week 9, get you ready for just some of the action that went down on Sunday afternoon. our week 9 recap, and then there's plenty more to come on that side. But for now, let's take another timeout and come back with more Dolphins post game right after this. The game stats and the week 9 recap coming right up when we continue on Dolphins post game for On the Ice and Behind the Benches and Sports for Beginners. We'll be right back. Looking for a good hockey podcast that covers your favorite hockey teams and mine? Check out On the Ice and Behind the Benches, where we chat about our favorite hockey teams from puck drop to the last play of the action. To learn more, follow the On the Ice and Behind the Benches Facebook page. Search On the Ice and Behind the Benches.
Looking for conversations on the world of broadcasting, sports media, and from time to time, my favorite sports teams? Listen to Broadcast Map with me, Ali Musa. To learn more about the show and to view the upcoming schedule, like the Broadcast Map Facebook page. Search Broadcast Map.
Game stats coming up in just a little bit here on Dolphins post game. Of course, it feels like a Bills post game, but we got the Bills post game show coming for you on the ice and behind the benches, and I'm sure it's available on Sports for Beginners, the podcast. Welcome into all of those listeners, whether you're listening to the program on Sports for Beginners or you're listening to the program on the ice and behind the benches. Welcome everyone into the program. We're going to get you right into the game stats in just a matter of moments, but let's get you all caught up to speed with our week 9 recap, and let's just get a little bit of knowledge in on how both games begin. It starts with Thursday night football between the Jets return home for Thursday night football after losing 25-22 to the New England Patriots. And what do they do with Aaron Rodgers and company and Devontae Adams? Well, they give Stephon Diggs and the Houston Texans another L, and they improved to 3-6 on the season. The Houston Texans, they improved to 6-3 on the season after the Houston Texans take another victory themselves, their sixth victory of the season against the Indianapolis Colts, the next team of conversation for the Buffalo Bills. They beat the Indianapolis Colts 23-20 in favor of the Houston Texans, and now here you go with Thursday night football against the Jets 21-13. Didn't look like that was a promising game for the Houston Texans. But you know what's great? Another week of football action with the Houston Texans as they'll get ready to face off against their next opponent in the Detroit Lions this Sunday night on Sunday Night Football. Speaking of the Lions, they had a match on Sunday afternoon against the Green Bay Packers in the snowy, rainy tundra of Lambeau Field. 24-14, the Detroit Lions beat the Green Bay Packers. Their record improved to 7-1 on the season. The Green Bay Packers record 6-3 on the season. Undefeated or not, here we come. Monday Night Football primetime featured a match that had everybody asking the question, will the Chiefs be undefeated by next week? Probably. Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes proved to the NFL on Monday night in the wraparound of Week 9 that just because you're undefeated doesn't mean you need a challenging team to challenge you to keep your undefeated streak. They beat the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in quite the showdown, 30-24 in overtime on Monday night. Tampa Bay improves to a record of 4-5 on the season. Meanwhile, the undefeated Chiefs of the NFL in Kansas City continue their undefeated streak to an 8-0 run as they get ready to face the Denver Broncos, who also picked up a loss in their action in a 41-10 final over the Baltimore Ravens. And tonight's Thursday night football opponent on week number 10 with the Baltimore Ravens in Lamar Jackson, 41-10 victors over the Denver Broncos. Like Sunday night football matchups? Well, how about this one in the Sunday night primetime action for the NFL in week 9 as the Minnesota Vikings improved to 6-2 on the season. They were 5-2 coming over to face the Indianapolis Colts, and they end up beating the Indianapolis Colts in week 9, 21-13. Records again, Indianapolis Colts 4-5 on the season. The Minnesota Vikings 6-2 on the season. All right. Let's get into the game stats. And then if there's time, we'll get more into the week 9 recap. We still have some conversations to talk about with my thoughts on the game, as well as get you our Dolphins player of the season so far and our game balls of the game, which due to time constraints will do only one game ball of the game for each team, and we've got some more thoughts on the game as well before setting it up for the Rams and Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills and the Indianapolis Colts, next week's opponent. Quick reminder of how we got into this score as the Dolphins get swept by the Bills. Quick reminder of how we got to this score: 3-3 after one quarter of play, 7-10 or 10-6, after the first half. Heading into the fourth quarter, the Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills score was 20-13, 20-13. And the final score of the last half in the second half, the fourth quarter, the last quarter of the second half, the Bills end off the game with a 30-27 victory over the Dolphins. 30 Buffalo Bills, 27 Miami Dolphins. All right, are we all caught up to speed? Great, we're all caught up to speed. Let's get the game stats out of the way because we've got so much more to come on Dolphins Post Game, and we got another half of the Week 9 recap to look at in case there is time to get there. As always, we start with the possession time, and we're going to switch things up a little bit with the possession time and save that for a little later on when we're getting ready to wrap things up. So let's switch it up. Let's have a look at it from a defensive perspective, and we'll start off with the interception yards. The Miami Dolphins with the only interception yards, only 1 yard for interception yards. They also had, in terms of kickoff yards, 2 kickoff yards for 55 yards. Buffalo, with one chance on the punt, got one punt return for 29 yards for the Miami Dolphins. It wasn't very much of a punt return. It was just like 1 punt yard and only a yard gained on the play for the Miami Dolphins. So a little bit of a suckish bet there. They returned the ball for 54 yards. The Buffalo Bills returned the ball for 29 yards. Let's talk touchdowns. And touchdowns for both teams kind of evenly matched here. We've got 3 touchdowns for the Buffalo Bills, and we've got 3 touchdowns for the Miami Dolphins. 3 of those touchdowns for the Buffalo Bills. No surprise here, no running game needed for the Buffalo Bills. All 3 touchdowns coming off of the passing game. Elsewhere on the Miami Dolphins side of things, Mike McDaniel's team needs 1 rushing touchdown on the ground, so we get a rushing game touchdown for the Miami Dolphins, and we get 2 touchdowns in the air on the passing game for the Miami Dolphins. We mentioned interception yards earlier in the game stats, and the only person to throw interceptions would be Josh Allen with the first and only interception of the game. But according to defensive special teams on CBS Sports, the one we're looking at, none of those interceptions, or rather fumbles, if there were any fumbles, were recovered and returned for a touchdown on the other side of the field. Speaking of return for touchdowns on the other side of the field, how about we talk about turnovers? Both teams turned over the ball once, and the Dolphins fumbled the ball one and actually two times. They lost the ball and then they recovered the ball the second time they fumbled, leaving us with just one fumble recovery for the Dolphins and one fumble loss for the Dolphins, as the Bills, they never fumbled the ball and never recovered it. So they didn't have a shot at fumbles. So they were doing pretty well for fumbles. However, they did turn the ball over just like Miami one time in the game. Talk about how the quarterbacks and Tua and Josh both did within the game stats before we get into how they did with goal to go efficiency and how they did in the red zone. And we're going to start with how both teams did with a chance for fourth down efficiencies and third down efficiencies. And it looks like both teams traded fourth down conversions, as both teams were able to convert one out of the one try they had on fourth down. So they were both efficient on fourth down. But what about third down? How efficient on third down were the Miami Dolphins or the Buffalo Bills on third down? Well, on third down efficiency for the Miami Dolphins, they converted just 4 times out of 8 on third down efficiency. Meanwhile, for the Buffalo Bills, they converted just like 5. They had 5 conversions for 10 tries. They had 10 third downs, but they converted 5 of those 10 third downs. Hey, would have been nice if they got like an 11th third down, and let's see if they can make 6 conversions. Seems like Josh Allen, the Buffalo Bills, Tua Tagovailoa, and of course the Miami Dolphins were pretty efficient on third downs and fourth down efficiencies, considering both teams traded for fourth down efficiencies and both converted on those fourth down chances they get on the first try. Buffalo ended up taking 4 penalties in this game for first down. The Miami Dolphins ended up taking just 2 penalties for first down market, and they had 10 rushing first downs to mark 26 first downs for them, with 14 passing for first downs. The Buffalo Bills saw 24 first downs, ending with 4 being penalties for first downs, 5 of them being rushing first downs on the ground, and 15 of them being passing first downs, so completed passes for first downs. Nearing the end of our game stats, so let's talk about how both teams did on possessions. And the Miami Dolphins had the ball 31 minutes and 53 seconds. So they had the ball for like 31 minutes and 53 seconds as a time of possession. The Buffalo Bills, on the other hand, they kind of had it for like the same amount of time than the Dolphins did, but they only had it for like 28 minutes and 7 seconds. And the Buffalo Bills, much to the Miami Dolphins' surprise, I mean, I don't think it's really much a surprise, but much to their surprise, they only made like 59 plays, averaging yards per pass of 5.5. Of course, I'm actually saying yards per play, which was 5.5 for the Buffalo Bills and 6.2 for the Miami Dolphins with 60 plays. How did we get to the total yardage of the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills at 325 yards for the Bills and 373 yards for the Dolphins? Well, let's have a look at how our passing yards went. And we mentioned that there was a lot of passing going on for the Buffalo Bills as a result of their 3 touchdown passes from Josh Allen, who made, according to completion pass attempts, completion attempts, he made just 25 completions out of 39 attempts. So 25 out of 39 completion attempts for Josh Allen, giving the Buffalo Bills a total of 235 passing yards in this week's matchup between the Dolphins and the Bills, averaging just 5.8 yards a carry per pass. Did get sacked once by the Miami defense, but only lost 4 yards. As for Tua, on the other hand, he got sacked once for a loss of 7 yards. However, he was 7.7 in yards per pass out of 25 completion attempts out of 28. So 25 out of 28 completion attempts for Tua Tagovailoa against the Buffalo Bills in this game. 25 completed passes out of 28 attempts, that they would average a passing game yard in this game against Buffalo with 231 yards passing against the Buffalo Bills. So 231 yards, hey, that doesn't seem like too bad of a passing yards, especially since the Buffalo Bills only had 235 passing yards compared to the Miami Dolphins, who had 231. So that's not such a bad one for the Miami Dolphins. You kept it close with just 4 yard differences for the Miami Dolphins against the Buffalo Bills in this week matchup between the Miami Dolphins and the Buffalo Bills. We talked about return yards earlier on. Now we're going to get into the red zone efficiency, and we're going to also talk about the rushes and yards per rush. Let's get into yards per rush before we get into the rushes. And actually, we'll get into the rushes just before we get into the yards per rush. So with 31 rushes for the Miami Dolphins, the Miami Dolphins had 31 rushes. The 19 rushes from the Buffalo Bills got an average yards per rush at 4.9, while the yards per rush for the Miami Dolphins received the yards per rush at 4.8. Both teams suffered penalties during first downs, 2 for the Miami Dolphins, 4 for the Buffalo Bills. They each took penalties, and a likely number of penalties, but not enough penalties for the referees, the officials in the game that were calling the match for the Buffalo Bills, to say, get out of here. We need to reschedule this game when the teams are not as violent as they were. Now, of course, when I say violent, I'm not saying like they were rowdy. They have to be rowdy. It's their job to be rowdy and rough each other up. That's the whole point of a full contact sport like the NFL. But let's just say it didn't get to the point that happened in a season ago. I think it was a season ago for the Buffalo Bills that we heard on Buffalo Bills Post Game, a show that didn't really get a chance to hit the platform. But I think it was when it was the Monday night matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Buffalo Bills when we saw Damar Hamlin go into cardiac arrest. Of course, the NFL had to stop due to that reason, but I'm sure by now we all know what that really meant for Damar Hamlin. The good news is he's fully recovered. Let's continue on with the game stats and say congratulations on Damar Hamlin for surviving a cardiac arrest, something that is very, very terrifying to look at. I mentioned the penalties, so I didn't say how many penalties they got, but 2 of those penalties were first down attempts for the Dolphins, and 4 of those penalties were first down attempts for the Buffalo Bills. Now, both teams did receive a number of penalties, but for the Bills, they only received about the same amount of numbered penalties that they received for first down attempts, including 4 out of 40 penalties that could have been called against them. So there were like 40 penalties that could have been called against the Buffalo Bills, but they only got 4 penalties called against them. Meanwhile, the Miami Dolphins, while they only got 2 penalties for first downs called against them, they also got 8 penalties out of 57 penalties to be called against them. So they got eight penalties. That was more than I think the Buffalo Bills got out of 57 penalties. They got eight penalties out of 57. Wow. Wrap up our game stats of the game after another quick timeout on Dolphins Post Game and get you ready for what's next for the Dolphins and the Bills, as well as a little bit more of our thoughts on how Tua Tagovailoa was able to come in to play against the Buffalo Bills after making his return to what we covered on Dolphins Post Game, the Arizona Cardinals match between the Arizona Cardinals and the Miami Dolphins. Top around of the game stats and the game balls of the game, plus our Dolphins player of the season this far, is coming up next when Dolphins Post Game continues on Sports for Beginners and on the ice and behind the benches. Stick with us.
CNT Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down, nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on CNT Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on CNT Radio.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
3 minutes left to go in the Pittsburgh Penguins hockey game and 3 minutes left to go on Dolphins Post Game before we send you off to Dolphins Post Game's next topic of conversation in the Pittsburgh Penguins as they're wrapping up a game between the Carolina Hurricanes, with the Carolina Hurricanes leading 4-0 right now, with Jordan Martin-Nuke leading the charge, getting things started in the first period, as now we're getting into the 60th minute, and we're getting ready for Penguins post game on Sports for Beginners. But you can catch this recap of Sports for Beginners, this Penguin post game, right after their Penguins off day on Wednesday. That will be the 20th of Wednesday. We'll have it for you on Penguins Wednesday Hockey. If you miss it on Penguins Post Game's original broadcast station of Sports for Beginners, coming up after Dolphins football gets out of here on Sports for Beginners this side. So hopefully you join Scott McGregor for that game. Again, 4-0 is the score. Hurricanes lead the season series 1-2. It looks like they'll have a season series lead of 2-0, but anything can happen in the game as it progresses. Right now, it's 4-0 for all those Penguins fans tuning in to a Thursday night edition of Dolphins Post Game, recapping the Bills and the Dolphins. If you are Dolphins fans, but you're also Penguins fans, I invite you to join us after Dolphins football wraps up to get to know Scott McGregor with Penguins and Hurricanes after that game goes final. Speaking of hockey, I invite those Dolphins fans that are also a part of Leafs Nation to join me, Thomas McGregor, your host of Maple Leaf Post Recap, for a bunch of Maple Leaf Post recaps coming as we try to navigate through this 82-game season, where our goal is to get 81 games covered, and we're on our way into the November schedule. We've got a matchup between the Blues, the two matchups between the St. Louis Blues ongoing. We'll get you two matchups between the Boston Bruins. We'll get you a matchup between the Kraken and the Jets. We'll get you a matchup between Minnesota Wild, and plenty more games, including a season series post-game show regarding the final matchup between the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs, when the Montreal Canadiens and the Toronto Maple Leafs end their season series. All right, back to the football topic of conversation. Back to football. Back to football. As I mentioned before the timeout, I said let's cap off the game stats with the finishing touches of the game stats. So let's go ahead and do that. We all know the score was 30-27, and we know that if this was a season series matchup, it's pretty safe to say that in 2 meetings, the Buffalo Bills sweep the Miami Dolphins in baseball terms in just 2 games. And one of those games was Thursday night a few weeks ago in week number 2 of the season, where the Bills, yes, the Bills again beat the Dolphins 31-10. That was the final of that game in week 2. To wrap up the game stats, here's a look at how both teams did in the red zone and goal to go efficiency, since we capped up pretty much everything else in the earlier half of the game stats portion. First thing to consider is the goal to go efficiency, and the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins each converted. For the Buffalo Bills, it took them 2 chances on goal to go efficiency, and they converted 2 times on goal to go efficiency. For the Miami Dolphins, they converted 3 times out of 3 chances on goal to go efficiency. However, they were unable to convert 4 out of 4 chances they had in the red zone, but they did convert 3 out of the 4 chances they had in the red zone. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bills, they had 4 chances, they got 5 chances, and they only converted 2 times out of the 5 chances they got in the red zone. That pretty much does it for the game stats on this Dolphins post game edition. Save the rest of the week 9 recap for the back half of the post game show, because I really want to get into the game balls of the game, and I also want to get into our Dolphins player of the season. So let's start out with our game balls of the game, and as mentioned, due to time constraints, we're going to do one game ball for each member of each team. But before we get to that, let's do what we would usually do at the end of the show, as we are nearing the end of the show. And let's look at the Dolphins and the Bills next games, not including this week's opponent in week 10 of the season, but including the next matchups following the bye for the Buffalo Bills and the next matchup for the remainder of the season for the Miami Dolphins. We'll start off with Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills as they try to close down the door between the Kansas City Chiefs and the Indianapolis Colts to become, in the Sean McDermott era with Josh Allen at the quarterback, their 5th straight title on the AFC East division. Will that happen? That is a question to be answered on back halves of another Dolphin post-game shows to come. How can they close it down? Well, they can close it down with victories against the Kansas City Chiefs at 4:25 the next week, following this week's matchup against the Indianapolis Colts. But then they've got a bye week before playing Sunday Night Football against the 49ers at Highmark Stadium at 8:20 p.m. 8:20 is the start time for that kickoff. It's a few more 4 o'clock starts with the LA Rams at 4:25 p.m. against the Buffalo Bills in week number 14. And then they'll face the Detroit Lions at 4:25 on the 15th of December. Yes, the 15th of December for the Buffalo Bills. They'll face the Detroit Lions at 4:25. Catch that game on CBS or wherever you get your show, or wherever you can stream it. And Bill Belichick time with the Buffalo Bills. But get this, it's back to back, as they face the New York Jets one final time before they face the New England Patriots in week number 18. And before they face the New York Jets for the final time, it's a 1 o'clock start at Highmark Stadium against the Patriots on week number 16, December 22nd, 2024. 1 o'clock start time for the Patriots and the Bills in week number 16 of the season. And then a 1 o'clock start time for the New York Jets at Highmark Stadium for the Buffalo Bills. And then where are the Bills playing on Sunday against the New England Patriots? But Gillette Stadium. What time will the game be at? We'll find out those answers in weeks' time, as we are 9 weeks away from knowing what that will be. We are on week 10, so we will be 8 weeks away from the finale of the regular season when we hit week 11 of the season. Can Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills help pull it off, Bills Mafia? Can they win their 5th straight AFC East title? I don't know, but I like their chances. Well, for the Miami Dolphins, we are 6-2 on the season. We're hoping for a victory Monday night against the Los Angeles Rams. That's Monday night, November the 11th. The start time, it's an 8:15 start time for the Miami Dolphins. They're the only Miami Dolphins football action happening on Monday night. They're the only action happening on Monday night. No doubleheader there. Then Mike McDaniel and the Miami Dolphins get ready to face the Las Vegas Raiders for a 1 p.m. start time at Hard Rock Stadium. So the home of the Miami Dolphins, and that will be on November 17th following the Monday Night Football match. So that will be the next week. Coming for the Miami Dolphins, they'll face the New England Patriots one final time before we get even closer to facing the New York Jets. And that matchup will be in Hard Rock Stadium at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on November 24th. November 24th, that will be the 12th matchup week for the Miami Dolphins. Again, the Miami Dolphins did beat the Patriots 15-10 in week number 5 of the season before the bye week. In week number 6 action, where they did not play football unless they were watching the teams go head to head that were in action for that game. Of course, the Kansas City Chiefs were not in action as well for that game, but they are an undefeated team. So I digress there. After the final matchup between the New England Patriots kicks off week 12 for the Miami Dolphins, it's a matchup between the Green Bay Packers on Thursday Night Football. Note the start time, 8:20 p.m. start time. The Miami Dolphins will be saying hello to Green Bay Packers Nation in Lambeau Field. Lambeau Field be the matchup in week number 3 with the Miami Dolphins. Lambeau Field and the Green Bay Packers take on Hard Rock Stadium and the Miami Dolphins. That should be a great match. What else could be a great match? The team that the Miami Dolphins are ending the season with at a time to be determined in week number 18 and a Sunday to be determined on January 5th. 2025. January 5th, 2025 is when the next matchup for the New York Jets and the Miami Dolphins take stage. Before that even happens, though, they face the Jets at 1 o'clock on CBS on December the 8th. Sunday, December the 8th for week number 14. And then they hit the road to Houston Texans for a matchup against the Stephon Diggs team in Houston Texans. That one should be a great one. That one should be good to watch as well. That one should be a good one as well to watch. And then just 2 matchups before the Jets match between the Dolphins finale. It's a matchup between the 49ers in week number 17 on Sunday Night Football, December 29 at 8:20 p.m. Eastern Time. December 29th, 2024 is the 8:20 start time on Sunday Night Football. For that matchup takes place on week number 17. We have a 4:25 matchup between the 49ers and the Miami Dolphins. here at Hard Rock Stadium and here in Miami, Florida on December 22nd, 2024, December 22 on 2024's schedule. It will also mark the finale home game for the Miami Dolphins at Hard Rock Stadium this season. Hey, football fans, we're getting down to it. We are getting down to it. The playoffs are approaching, and the Dolphins are at a record right now of 6-2 on the season. They have lost 6 games. They have won 2 games. Hey, man, the clock is ticking. Has everybody hit the panic mode button? I sure haven't. I still think the Dolphins have a shot, but the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking. And could this be the year for the Buffalo Bills in the Super Bowl? I don't know, Bills Mafia. I really don't know. And neither of us know until we figure out where the Buffalo Bills' fate is. We can rest assured they are a part of this year's postseason picture. And I know Dolphins fans, you probably don't want to hear me say that, but it's probably an ungobblingly true. And I mean, it is basically true that the Buffalo Bills are, without a doubt, they are in the postseason picture this season. They are in it. Let's take 30 seconds of a timeout and wrap this up in a neat little bow. We unfortunately are not going to have time to take a look at the Week 9 finales. But just before we take that 30-second timeout, let's get a little bit of a Week 10 recap note of what Thursday Night Football looks like. It looks like the game just went final, or maybe it didn't go final. No, it didn't go final. It just started. There's no way it went final at 9 o'clock. Anywho, before we take that 30-second timeout, let's get you caught up to speed with Week 10's ongoing game of Thursday Night Football. It looks like the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals are knotted up at 7 points apiece, with touchdowns coming off of the quarterbacks of Lamar Jackson, a short right pass to Ed Aguilar for 6 yards. That's 7 for the Baltimore Ravens. And then we have a 1-yard touchdown with M. Lee reported as eligible. Chris Brown, right guard, 1-yard touchdown. And it is Evan McPherson with the pad up and good. The Bengals got on the board quick, but the second quarter leaves us tied at 7 points apiece. Right, we gotta get closed out with Dolphins post game and prepare for post game show on the other side of Sports for Beginners with Penguins hockey on the other side. And of course, I've got some hockey for you on the ice and behind the benches regarding the Maple Leafs. So that's still to come on the ice and behind the benches. But until we get into that 30-second timeout, which is going to happen right now, we are coming to wrap up Dolphins postgame for the Bills and the Dolphins. The Bills sweep the Dolphins. We wrap that show up next in 30 seconds. Stay with us.
Looking for a sports podcast that covers sports weekly as well as gets you set up for the day? Check out Weekly in Sports with me, Scott McGregor. We give some shout-outs of the week to podcasts like this one and those who do them. Discuss the Blue Jays, Bills, Raptors, and more. To learn more, check out the Sports for Beginners Facebook page. Search Sports for Beginners.
I wonder if I could make it. It's almost getting to 8 o'clock p.m., and I am still a few more steps away from home to get to my computer to listen to CNT Radio's Cosmopolitan Culture Club. The best of the best music from around the world. Can't wait. I think I made it. CNT Radio, making your day brighter one song at a time.
Couple of weeks ago, the Buffalo Bills opened up their season with the Miami Dolphins, beating them at 31-10 in week number 2 and the first Thursday night football matchup of the NFL season. The cut to this week, week 9, that is now gone in the books, and the Buffalo Bills have swept the Miami Dolphins. This time, though, it's the Dolphins with 27 points and the Bills with 30. So the Bills go on to sweep the Dolphins 30-27. Of course, 31-10 was the week 2 matchup final. My final thoughts on this game are coming up in just a matter of moments. But before we get into any of those and get you ready for Rams at Dolphins, Bills at Colts, this week's matchup in week number 10. We're getting you ready for those games and sending you off to Penguins Post Game on the other side of Sports for Beginners. You can hear Scott's voice on Penguins Wednesday Hockey. The next Penguins Wednesday Hockey is Wednesday, November 20th, when the Penguins have an off day on the 20th of November. The last Penguins post game in November will be Wednesday, November 20th. But we'll have a special Wednesday Penguins hockey happening on Thursday, November 28th. Before we say goodbye to Penguins Wednesday hockey until December the 11th, after the Maple Leafs second match between the Penguins and the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'll have you for a Penguins post game that you can also have on Maple Leaf Post Recap with Scott in studio for Penguins post game. And then, of course, we'll have the Avalanche game and the Canadiens kick us off in the high gear. But December 11th will be the kickoff of Wednesday hockey for Penguins hockey on the ice and behind the benches. Hopefully you join us for that. Let's talk about the Bills and the Dolphins one last time and get you the game balls of the game. As mentioned, we're going to do one game ball, and it's going to be for either side of the team. So let's start off with the winning team, the sweeping team, and the Buffalo Bills, who are just 2 games away from becoming AFC East 5-time champion division winners. Of course, that is still up for grabs, but they are 2 games away from becoming AFC East 5-time AFC East champions. And when I say 5 times, I'm also referring to it being in the Sean McDermott era with Josh Allen. And speaking of Josh Allen, that's where I kind of put the game balls of the game into, as he is kind of my game baller of the game. But I'll put in some honorable mentions there. I'll put in some honorable mentions. And for me, the reason why I'm picking Josh Allen is not because he threw 3 touchdowns and got picked off once, but it's because of his yardage in just 25 out of 39 completions. He made 235 yards and averaged just 6 yards a carry with, again, 3 touchdowns. He did get picked, yes, and he did get sacked for a loss of 4 yards, but I think averaging just 6 yards a carry, 235 yards, and making 25 completions out of 39 completions, that's pretty good enough for my game ball of the game. But but you gotta put your money where your mouth is sometimes. And when I say money where your mouth is sometimes, I'm also referring to, like, let's give some rushing credit and give some honorable mentions here for the rushing game. I mean, obviously, this was all Josh Allen's game, but this was also all of the kickers game as well, as Tyler Bass. He jumps into that honorable mention. I mean, you look at a guy like Tyler Bass, you look at kickers who are pretty good, and I'm not saying Tyler Bass is bad. I'm not saying any of the other kickers are bad, like Jason Sanders or anything like that. No. I'm saying that you look at guys who don't miss kicks or miss kicks, but still have a good game and the team makes them feel better, like we heard from Sheldon Keefe on one of my previous episodes on the ice and behind the benches, where he says, and I quote, make me look good on a lot of nights. But I mean, just look at this. Yes, he missed one extra point, but he nailed three field goals. Three field goals he nailed, and that third field goal was a 61-yard field goal attempt. A field goal attempt from 61 yards. That's pretty tough one to get, especially if you're a kicker. I'm sure Tyler Bass would agree with me. If you're not able to make a 61-yard field goal, and there's not many kickers that are able to do that, I'm sure. I'm sure we can all do it if we try, but 61 yards, that's a lot of yards to make a field goal. He definitely gets an honorable mention in this game, and we are definitely going to give an honorable mention to Mr. 70 yards, 35 point yards average a carry, a touchdown, 63 yards being his longest, and that is Ray Davis. Honestly, who would have thought this guy out of 2 targets and 2 receptions? The second reception he gets, it's a 70-yarder reception, giving us a final tally of his average 35 yards a game. And that was against the Dolphins of Miami. That was against the Dolphins. The Dolphins. Ray Davis, the Dolphins, picks up 35 yards average on a 70-yard gain, and his longest yards was what, 63? Dang, that is a lot of yards. That is a lot of yards. Dang, that is a lot of yards for Ray Davis. Great job, buddy. Great job on that game. And congratulations on the win. Right, it's time now to wrap up the program with our game balls of the game from the Miami Dolphins. And we are going to get into our Dolphins player of the season as well. That is coming up in just 2 minutes' time. While there may be some guys that I'll put up in honorable mentions for this one, none of them come as close to Jason Sanders. I mean, Jason Sanders. He was the guy that kept us in this game. Yes, touchdowns are important. Yes, I get that. So are extra points and field goal attempts. And yes, field goals doesn't help you win championships. Defense does help you win championships. But the ongoing analysis as to why I'm picking Jason Sanders as my game ball of the game for the Miami Dolphins is Jason Sanders nailed 2 field goals. His longest yardage was 39 yards, and he nailed all 3 extra points. That's why he's my and that's why he's my Dolphins game ball of the game. All right, coming up in just about a minute or so time, we've got our Dolphins player of the season. But just before we get to that, we have looked at the next games for the Dolphins and the Bills, and we are going to get in to our attendance record from that week in week 9. But before we do, I have some thoughts to bring out. And of course, I would like to touch on Tua Tagovailoa. Tua, you were an absolute star. It really, really sucked that we could not see you against the other game matchups that were in play. It really, really sucked. We couldn't see you, but you were injured, and I am just glad that you're back on the field and ready to go. I know a lot of Dolphins fans are probably like saying, "Why are you talking about Tua? Why are you talking about his injury? His injury's over, man. He recovered, man. He's back on the field." The reason I bring up Tua and his injury is because there's a lot to go through with that, and I was actually expecting him to be back for the matchups before the Arizona Cardinals. I actually thought we might have seen him against the Patriots, but injury prevented it. So I'm just glad Tua's back, and I'm hoping for a much better game against the LA Rams if he is indeed the quarterback for the Miami Dolphins. the rest of the way for the remainder of the season. So I am a little worried about where he's going. We almost lost him again against Buffalo, and of course, we lost him in week number 2, and he did not play against Seattle. He did not play against the Titans, and he certainly did not play against the New England Patriots. But you were ready for Kyler Murray, and then you were ready for the Buffalo Bills. I still don't know where everybody's head's at with Tua, but I am just happy he's back. And with that being said, here is our attendance record, and here is, in just 30 seconds from now, our wraparound of our Dolphins player of the season. So once again, the Dolphins are swept by the Buffalo Bills. We already know the score. I'm not going to reiterate it because I want to get into our player of the season for the Dolphins this year, knowing that this could be a fast off season approaching, but we are only in week number 10 of the season. Things can still change, things can still happen. We will see what happens. We have passed the trade deadline for the NFL this season, but with all this being said, and Buffalo completely out of the picture for the Dolphins' schedule for the road ahead, as we just mentioned what those games were, with the Jets wrapping up with the Miami Dolphins this season. This 30-27 ball game with the Buffalo Bills taking the victory over the Miami Dolphins was in front of an attendance record of 70,862 fans in attendance, with Tara Blake being the referee for the game. The game in Carolina has gone final for the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's time now to send you over to Pittsburgh Penguins hockey. But before we can do any of that, let's wrap up Dolphins post game for the Bills and the Dolphins and get you our Dolphins player of the season this far. And that Dolphins player of the season this far, despite the ups and downs we are having this season for the Miami Dolphins and their fans this season, that Dolphins player of the season goes to 34 receptions, 446 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown this season. That one goes to the cheetah, the roadrunner, Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is my Dolphins player of the season this far. He has had a pretty great season despite the up and downs that we're having, with fewer wins and more losses, being that the Dolphins have only won 2 games and lost 6 of those other games. But a new week approaches in week 10. That's with the Los Angeles Rams. Let's hope we get a club dub over at On the Ice and Behind the Benches and Sports for Beginners, and hope to be 3-6 on the season against the Los Angeles Rams. Of course, the second victory coming against the New England Patriots, a team that is still left to go on the season for the Miami Dolphins. That was a 15-10 victory over the Miami Dolphins, with the New England Patriots getting the loss and the Patriots and the Dolphins getting the win. The only other win was against Jacksonville early on in the week 1 matchup, 20-17. That came down to a game-winning field goal. I digress that. So here's what you can expect on Dolphins postgame as we've wrapped up the program. We have done all we can. Unfortunately, we're not able to finish off the week 9 action. Let's have one final look at the Thursday night football action in week number 10 of the season, and that is against the Baltimore Ravens and the Cincinnati Bengals. It looks like we're still knotted up at 7 points apiece as we near halftime, but anything could change that game. Thank you as always for joining us on another edition of Dolphins Post Game. Come back with me Tuesday after the Dolphins either pull off a win or a loss to the Los Angeles Rams will have a Dolphins post game for you on Tuesday on Sports for Beginners, but you can catch it on the ice and behind the benches ahead of the Wednesday action on the original scheduled date for Penguins post game, which will be Wednesday, November 13th. But Penguins Wednesday hockey will be back on Wednesday, November 20th. So Dolphins post game will be taking over that Wednesday. And we might have some other shows on that Wednesday while the Penguins get ready for a matchup against the Red Wings Wednesday, November 13th. See that game on Sports for Beginners with Scott McGregor, who we're sending it off to for Canes and Hurricanes. That game just went final on Penguins post game. That post game show is coming up next on Sports for Beginners. We're sending you over to another edition of hockey for the Maple Leafs post recap. And until then, Dolphins Nation, my name is Thomas McGregor, and this has been Dolphins football on Dolphins post game. Until Tuesday, Sports for Beginners fans, I am Thomas McGregor saying happy week 10 to all of you. Let's have a great week. Let's pick up a dub against the Los Angeles Rams, and let's go Fins. Fins up. Dolphins postgame returns Tuesday on Sports for Beginners, and you can catch it on Wednesday on the Ice and Behind the Benches, November the 13th. But we're sending you off to Pittsburgh Penguins hockey on Sports for Beginners. I am Thomas McGregor, and this has been Dolphins football on Sports for Beginners and on the ice and behind the benches. Have a great evening, everybody. Closing messages next, and to close it out, we'll have the victory speech from the locker room of Buffalo Bills to finish it off. I'll see you Tuesday after the Rams and Dolphins game. Peace out, everyone. Peace out, everyone.
Where's that guy that just made it? Franchise record, 61. Hang on. Just give me a sec. I'm going to let him have the floor here. Unbelievable journey this guy's been on, man. Unbelievable, right? Mentally tough. So proud of you, man. So proud of you. Aren't you guys proud of him? And I just leaned on you guys heavy, and you're always there for me. And for me to go out and do that for you guys, man. Hey, you want to have Victory Monday? Absolutely. All right, listen. Hey, let that be a reminder to us of how hard it is to win week to week in this league, man. Right? A big-time reminder. A little bit of humble pie, but I'll tell you what, when the game is on the line, you guys are at your best. And that's an important trait right there, man, right? T-Bass, great example of it right there. Not so good early, comes back, hits the game winner, man. 61 yards. And Reed, and Sam, and the guys that were out there blocking, heck of a job, man. Heck of a job. Love you, boys. Hey, family on three. 1, 2, 3.
Thank you so much for listening to Sports for Beginners. If you would like to learn more about the show, you can visit the podcast Facebook page or visit the official website. You can also send us an email at sportsforbeginnerspodcast8231@gmail.com. As we always remind you, it is not goodbye, it is until next time.